Greetings folks, it's Ian from RTO here and welcome to part 2 of the David Bowie album ranking. Last week we went from number 26 up to number 14 and today we're going to go 13 to 1. So just before we start I'll just do a recap of where we are. So number 26 was Outside, number 25 was Earthling, number 24 Black Star, number 23 was Heathen, number 22 was the Buddha of Suburbia, number 21 was Black Tie White Noise, number 20 Never Let Me Down, number 19 was Tonight, number 18 was The Next Day, number 17 was Reality, number 16 Pinups, number 15 Hours, and the controversial one that I got a little bit of grief over, but we all like to listen to things differently, and that was Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. Now I just want to say that I am a huge David Bowie fan, so, and I do like most of the albums, some better than others. It's just a personal choice. If we all like the same David Bowie albums it'd be a bit boring, but the thing is, because we all like different albums, it means that all the albums get respected and loved. So let's crack on with the top 13 David Bowie albums as I'll rank them. So coming in at number 13 we got the 9th album that was released in 1975 and it's Young Americans. On this one we have got, of course, Mr. Bowie, and he's doing some vocals and keyboards and guitars. Carlos Alomar is on guitars, Mike Garson piano, David Sanborn plays the saxophone, we got Willie Weeks on bass and Andy Newark on drums. Earl Slick turns up on guitars as well. First track on here was a really great track called Young Americans. I like this, it's got a little bit of a reggae feel to it, and I do love the saxophone in it. It's a great track. Then we get Win. This one isn't too bad. I think this was the sort of a start of another change of direction for David. This is a pretty good track, I don't mind it. Then we get Fascination. This was totally different sort of direction again, but I do like this, and it just proves what a versatile artist David Bowie was. Then we get Right. I'm not keen on this one, never have been. I just don't know, there's something about it that I'm not keen about. Then we get Someone Up There Likes Me, one of my favourite tracks on here. I just love the saxophone again, it just gives it that extra depth. It's a great vocal, good song. Then we get a cover of the Beatles' Across the Universe, and I'm sorry, it's not a very good version of it. I just don't like it. Can You Hear Me? Lovely piano work on this. It's a pretty cool track, really strong track. And then we get Fame, my favourite on the album, and it is a classic. A different style again, but it's one of the outstanding tracks on this album. I think this is a bit of a mixed bag for me. Change of direction, as David used to do. There's some really good tracks on here though, and it is an enjoyable album. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 5.6. Okay, coming in at number 12 then, got the 10th album from 1976, Station to Station. On here we've got David decides he's going to have a go at doing some vocals, some guitar. He plays the tenor and alto sax, the mini moog and the mellotron. Carlos Alomar's on guitars, Earl Six on guitars. We've got George Murray playing the bass, Dennis Davis on the drums, Roy Bittan on piano and organ, Warren Peace does some backing vocals. We've got Harry Maslin on melodica synthesizer and vibraphone. Opens up with the title track, the 10-minute Station to Station. It's a really good song, but I think that bit in the middle sort of loses itself. It goes off into some little tangent, but the thing is, it comes back in, and I think that's why it's not a bad song. Although take that middle section out, because it just doesn't do anything for me, but the rest of the song does. Then we get a classic, The Golden Years, my favourite track on this. I love the guitar on this, and I love that backing vocal. It's a strong track. Word on a Wing, it's okay, but I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite tracks on the album. It just lacks something. Then we get TVC15, my second favourite track on this album. Solid track from David, and I remember, I think he played this at Live Aid. It's just a great track. Stay, great track again. I love the bass line on this. It drives the song along. Then we get Wild is the Wind. I like this track. Like how it's structured. It's nice, gentle, and it's a great vocal from David. Not a bad album. Two really strong tracks on this. I think if Station to Station was just a little bit shorter, I think this would have been a bit higher, but it does lose itself. But it's still a pretty good album. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 5.8. Okay then, coming in at number 11, we got the album that started it all for him, and it's just called David Bowie, and it was released in 1967. And playing on here, we got David on vocals, guitar, Big Jim Sullivan on guitar, banjo and sitar, Derek Boyles on organ, Derek Fernley on the bass, John Eager on the drums, Marianne Constable on backing vocals. The first track on here is called Uncle Arthur. It's one of them songs that you could sing down the pub, and it's all about his Uncle Arthur getting married. Nice little ditty. Okay, it's probably not his real Uncle Arthur, but it says quite a little ditty. Then we get Sell Me a Coat. A little bit plain, not very inspirational, I'm afraid. Rubber Band, well, it's a bit basic, but remember, this is the first album. Love You Till Tuesday, it's alright. He's trying to sound like Tony Crystal, Engelbert Humperdinck, but every man to himself, still discovering what he wants to do. There Is a Happy Land, it's okay. We Are Hungry Men, it is a bit weird. We've got a newsreader going mad. Yeah. Slows down halfway through, speeds up. Don't know what's going on here. When I Live My Dream, got some phone calls going up, some funny vocals going on here. It's alright. Little Bombardier. This is a cross between a German and Papa song. It's very strange, but listenable. Silly Boy Blue, probably the worst track on the album. I'm not a very big fan of that. Come Buy My Toys, my favourite track on this album, always has been. It's very simple and it's well structured. Join the Gang, a quirky little track, it's okay. She's Got Medals, I like this track. This is more what you were going to get later on in David's career. Maid of Bond Street, that's alright. Please Mr. Gravedigger, very strange song. On this album you got Sparks of Magic, but it's a very mishmashed album. Got to remember though, David was only 19 when he recorded this. He didn't really know what direction he was going, but I've got sort of an affection for it, because we all have to start somewhere. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 6 out of 10. Already want some coffee, terrible. Okay, we got to the top 10. These are the top 10 albums that I do like listening to. and they are probably the ones I play the most. So starting out the 10, we go to the 15th album released in 1983, and this will probably shock people, but I'm used to that now. It's Let's Dance from 1983. David Bowie, lead vocals, and produced it. And Nile Rodgers plays guitar and produced it. We've already mentioned this album in Nile Rodgers' show. And the musicians on here were Stevie Ray Vaughan, which was great, on lead guitar, Carmine Rodgers on bass, Bernard Edwards on the bass guitar on Without You, Homer Hampkin, Tony Thompson share the drums, Sammy Figuera on progression, Robert Sabino on keyboards and piano, Stan Harrison tenor saxophone and flute, Robert Aaron saxophone, Steve Ellison saxophones, Matt Gollan trumpet, and backing vocals were supplied by Frank Sims, George Sims and David Spinner. First track on here is the brilliant Modern Love. Love that guitar at the beginning. That's very Stevie Ray Vaughan. Great track. I love that track. China Girl, another classic from David. Love that oriental guitar at the beginning. Wonderful track. Then we get the classic Let's Dance. What a track this is. The best track on the album. Love the video to it. Big #1 song. I mean, the album version is longer, and it's got than the single without that. It's got a great saxophone. That's what I like about it. That saxophone on this is brilliant. Then we get Without You. It's okay. It's not particularly a favourite of mine, but I do like Nile Rodgers' guitar work. It's very distinctive. Ricochet. Yeah, it's not a bad track. Yeah, listenable. Again, it's got some nice guitar work in that one. Criminal World. I'm not very keen on this track, but I do like a guitar solo. Cat People, Pumping Out Fire. One of the deep cut tracks on here. It's written by Giorgio Moroder. Tell it's very him, but it's a really good track. Shake It. Probably the weakest track on the album for me. I think this album is good. I think the first 3 songs are probably some of the best pop songs that David Bowie did, and it sort of revitalised his career. There's 1 or 2 other good songs, but it's them first 3 songs that really are classic gems. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 7 out of 10. Okay then, coming in at #9, we've got his second album, released in 1969. Again, it's called David Bowie, but it's also known as Space Oddity for some reason. But it's not on the cover of the title. I think fans just call it that. So on here I got David, of course, and he's singing acoustic guitars, stylophone. Yes, I remember having one of them as a kid. The chord organ. Tim Renwick on the electric guitar, flute and recorder. Keith Christmas, acoustic guitar. Mick Wayne on the guitars. Rick Wakeman, of course, on mellotron and electric harpsichord. Tony Visconti on bass guitar, flute and recorder. Herbie Flowers is on this as well. John Lodge, bass guitar. John Cambridge, Terry Cox. Lots of people on here that went on to make real good careers. First track, of course, is one of my favourite songs by David Bowie, without a doubt, and it's the brilliant Space Oddity. Got a stylophone on it. How cool's that? A bit of stylophone. Brilliant track. Just an ultimate classic. Then we get Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed. Not too bad. The harmonica in this gets really irritating, but the riffs are really strong. Letter to Hermione. One of them sort of tracks that sort of lingers from his debut album. It's okay. Then we get Signet Committee. Don't mind this track. A little bit too long though, but you can see where the potential of coming. He was starting to try to develop that sound. So then we get Janine or Janine. Nothing wrong with this track. He's developing, he's taking that sound and trying to create something different. Then An Occasional Dream. This one's alright. It's a quirky little tune. I love the flute in this. It's quite good. Wide Eyed Boy from the Free Cloud. Bit flat for me. Got one of the best starts of a track though. I like the start of this. It's really good. God Knows I'm Good. Listenable but not memorable. A Memory of a Free Festival. It's the weakest track on here. It's a bit of a filler for me. Okay, apart from Space Oddity, which is an absolute classic, there are one or two tracks here that showed the potential of what was to come. This is a lot better than the debut. He's sort of starting to get what he wants to do, and I think this is a reasonably good album. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 7.2. Okay, then coming in at number 8, again 1979 now, the 13th album, Lodger. David Bowie, he's having synthesizers and pianos and guitars. Brian Eno, ambient drone, everything that's keyboardy. Tony Visconti plays mandolin and guitar. Adrian Bello, who went on to play with King Crimson on the mandolin. Carlos Almaz on guitars again. Dennis Davis back on the drums. Does a bit of bass as well. George Murray's on bass as well. Sean Mays is on the piano. Simon House plays mandolin. Roger Powell on synthesizers. And Stan Harrison on saxophone. First track on this. Fantastic Voyage. Like this track. Again, changing his sort of direction a little bit. Really good track. African Night Flight, written by Bowie and Eno. It's weird. It's got Brian Eno written all over it, but it's good. I like that. Move On. This is interesting vocal from David. But I do like the guitars on this. It's a pretty good track. Now I've got to get this right. Yasin is the next track. I really didn't get on with this track. Bit weird, too weird for me. Red Sails, good track, pretty decent listen. Some nice interesting ambient sounds on that one. DJ, again very strange, but it's got this hook of a guitar riff that really pulls you in. Look Back in Anger's next. A really good track. One of my favourites on the album. I love the bongos on this. Really good. Boys Keep Swinging. Very Roxy music, but I wonder why. But I like it. There's nothing wrong with this track. It's a really strong track. I like that. Repetition, sort of a mixture of modern sort of for the time of Bowie and some of the older stuff sort of mixed in there, and it's a really good track. Red Money, I love the guitar work on this. There's some great guitar work on this. I think this album's always been overlooked, but because it hasn't got any really big hits on it. But it's a very solid album. A bit experimental, yes, but having Brian Eno on board, you're going to have that sort of thing. It's a pretty solid album that does get forgotten about, and I like this album for its diverse of music. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. Okay then, coming in at number 7, got the 11th album, released in 1977, and it is called Low. David plays all sorts of instruments on here, from saxophones, guitars, bass. Brian Eno's on this, he's playing synthesizers. Carlos Almaz playing the guitars. Percussion's Dennis Davis. George Murray's on the bass. We've got Ricky Gardner on rhythm. Rob Young piano. Iggy Pop turns up and does some backing vocals along with Mary Visconti. Speed of Life is the opening track on this. Great track. I love this track. One of my favourites on the album. Good sound. Breaking Glass. It's a very short track, but some great drumming and guitar on it. Nice little short song. What in the World? Okay, it's got the classic sort of Brian Eno weirdness and genius of Brian Eno, and I quite like that track. Then we get a classic, Sound and Vision, my favourite song on this. I love the keyboard sound that they got on this, and I love David's vocal on this, because you get high bits and low bits. It's a really good track. Always Crashing the Same Car. Not one of my favourite tracks on the album, I'm afraid, but it has got some nice guitar on it. Be My Wife, quirky, great guitar, nice tune, like that one. A Career in a New Town, my second favourite track on this album. I like how this builds up. The drumming on this is absolutely fantastic. Great track. Then we get Was-a. Really nice piece of music. It's the vision of Brian Eno and David Bowie. Absolutely brilliant. Then we get Art Decade, a wonderful piece of ambient music. This is the different side of David Bowie. It does help when you got your mate Brian Eno helping, doesn't it? It's just wonderful stuff. Weeping Wall. Now, this is very quirky, but it's an instrumental sort of thing, and David plays every instrument on this track. Then we get Subterraneans, a very ambient again. I do love the saxophone, and it's got this eerie sort of vocal from David. A very good album, and very underrated in my books. RCA were dubious about releasing this because they didn't think it was be successful. Ha ha! The fans proved you wrong, because it got to number 2 in the album charts in the UK. So your fans know more than you, RCA. I like this because it's just got some ambient stuff on this, and it doesn't really get enough airplay. Really solid album, and I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 8.3. Okay, then we're starting to move up into the classics now. Well, my classics anyway. So number 6 is the 12th album from 1977, Heroes. Once again, Brian Eno joins David Bowie, Tony Visconti, Antona Mas backing vocals, Dennis Davis, George Murray and Carlos Amar, and Robert Fripp makes a guest appearance on this album as well. First track, brilliant track, Beauty and the Beast, really funky in places, got a great bass line, I love that track. Joe the Lion, one of the best tracks on the album, and it's got one of the best guitar riffs, brilliant. Then we get the classic, and this has got to be one of my favourite songs by David, and I love the lyrics. I think the lyrics are so strong, uplifting, and it's Heroes. Absolutely brilliant track. Sons of the Silent Age, very eerie, but a lovely saxophone solo on it, which is good. Blackout, solid track, really interesting arrangement, but does it work? Of course it does. This is Brian Eno and David Bowie. Then we get V2 Schneider, very Roxy music again, nothing wrong with that, but I do love the saxophone on it, really good. Sense of Doubt, very ambient, such a moving piece of music, some lovely keyboards in here. I do love it when David does an instrumental, and I do like that one, that's one of his best ones. Then we get Moss Garden, very oriental sound. I love the ambient stuff. Bowie and Eno together come up with some wonderful stuff over the years, and this is so relaxing. Then we got New Clone, or New Clone. Again, very eerie and ambient, atmospheric sounds. A lovely piece with the saxophone on it, lovely. Then we get The Secret Life of Arabia, another solid song with its ambience, and the vocals are really strong. Another album that I think gets a little bit overlooked because, okay, it's got Heroes on it, but the rest of the tracks are totally forgotten about. I think the instrumentals on here are some of the best ones that David Bowie put out. It's a great album from top to bottom, solid. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 8.5. Okay, number 5. We go to the third album now released in America in 1970, here in the UK in 1971, and it's The Man Who Sold the World. David Bowie on vocals and guitars. First, Mick Ronson's first outing with David. Then we got Tony Visconti on the bass and piano, Mick Woods-Manzi on the drums, Ralph Mace on the Moog synthesizer. First track on here is the brilliant The Width of a Circle. Very, very progressive, long track, well put together, lovely harmonising. Great bass line from Tony Visconti, and the guitar work from Mick Ronson is absolutely wonderful. I love this track. All the Madman, another great track. I think we're starting to get what David was really looking for, and Tony Visconti really produces this wonderfully. It's a great track. Then we get Black Country Rock. Very good thing. Some nice guitar work on this as well. Then we get After All, a nice little track, acoustic. One of these sort of songs that's still hanging around from them first two albums, but he's sort of matured the sound, and it's not so flat. It's really good track. Then we get Running Gun Blues, great track. Some great guitar work from Mick Ronson, absolutely stunning track. And then we get Save Your Machine, very progressive, some bit glammy as well. Then we get my favourite track on there, She Shook Me Cold, very rocky, heavy guitar work, absolutely brilliant. Then we get the title track, The Man Who Sold the World. Absolutely brilliant track. Again, it's got guitar work from Mick that really is brilliant. The Superman, the drumming on here is brilliant. Best drumming on the album. It's a weird track, but wonderful. Love this track a lot. This album is great. I think it's weird, but it was really the start of the classic years. It's got some nice stuff on here. Mick Ronson's guitar work really did add something to it, so I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 9 out of 10. Okay, coming in at number 4 from 1974. I know it's Mastermind, one of Mastermind Dave's favourite albums, and I know this is Richard McCook's favourite album of all time. It's Diamond Dogs. It is a brilliant album, but these 4 was so hard because I love these 4 albums so much. On here we've got David Bowie, Mike Garson, Herbie Flowers on bass, Tony Newman on the drums, Ainsley Dunbar on drums, Alan Parker on guitar. First, on 1984, the first track is called Future Legend. It's a 58-second intro. Atmospheric, gets you, David's vocal gets you hooked in because it goes straight into the brilliant Diamond Dogs. My second favourite track on the album, a great vocal from David. There's some great playing on this track. That bass line from Herbie is terrific. Sweet Thing, another fantastic track. Great vocal delivery from David, really moving track, I love it. Candidate, the guitar on this is brilliant. It's David playing the guitar. Great bass line again. Then you get a little bit more of Sweet Thing, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's a fantastic track. Then we get the classic Rebel Rebel, best track on the album. classic single, one of my favourite songs by David Bowie. Then we get Rock and Roll With Me, short track but an epic. Great vocal from David and some incredible guitar work on this. We Are Dead, my second favourite track on this. This is just awesome, a brilliant arrangement. Some great guitar. There's a lot of great guitar work on this. It's quite rocky as well. We Are Dead, as I've said, it's just brilliant. 1984. Not a particular fan of this, but Alan Parker's guitar works good. Big Brother. This is a really interesting track. Love the saxophone on it. The trumpet, really different. Then the chant of the ever circling skeletal family. Weird, but quite listenable. This album is great. It's got classic after classic. And some filler, I'm afraid. I have got a fondness to the album. I do play it a lot, but it's not my favourite. But I'll give it an RTO ranking of 9.4. Okay, then coming in at number 3, they got the 6th album from 1973. Brilliant album, Aladdin Sane. David Bowie, Mick Ronson, Trevor Bolder, Mick Woodmansey, Mike Garson. Lots of people playing bits and bobs on saxophones. Opens up with my favourite track on here. Watch That Man. What a great opening track. Gets you hooked into the song straight away. Bang! Great vocal from David. Love Trevor Bolder's bass line. Mick Ronson on the guitars. It's just brilliant. Then we get Aladdin Sane, 1913, 1938 to 1970 something. It's a weird track. Wonderful piano. I love the structure again. A little bit of progressive rock in places, but that piano is out really good. From Mike Garson. Terrific track. Driving Saturday, a classic. Always love this track. And I remember that Def Leppard have done a cover of this, and they do a great cover of it because it's a great track. Then we get the brilliant Panic in Detroit. The interplay here between Mr. Bolder and Mr. Ronson is terrific. Really getting the groove. Cracked Actor starts off with a great driving riff from Mick Ronson. Absolute killer track. Time, classic track for me. I love the piano on this. It's wonderful. The Prettiest Star, really groovy sort of track. You gotta remember this is at the time of the glam rock. This is sort of thing that T-Rex was doing. It's a great song. I love that song. It just remind me so much of Mark Bolan. Then we get a really funky version of the Stones, Let's Spend the Night Together. It's really funky and I actually like it. It's quite catchy. Then we get Ba-da-da-dum, Genie. My second favourite track on this song. What a great single from David. Then we get Lady Grinning Soul. I love Trevor's bass line. It's really gentle sort of track. Great vocal from David and some Spanish guitar on it. A classic album from top to bottom. Not a bad track on this. One of the classics, and I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 9.5. Top 2. Ooh, it gets so close. But coming at number 2 is the 4th album from 1971, and it's Hunky Dory, of course. David Bowie plays guitars and he plays the saxophone on Oh You Pretty Things. Mick Ronson's on there with mellotron and guitar. Trevor Bolder playing the trumpet along with his bass. Mick Woodmansey on drums. Rick Wakeman on piano, and Keith and Ken Scott on synthesizers. Opens up with the classic changes. Love this song. Just a classic. Everyone loves this. Brilliant song. Oh You Pretty Things. Love the start of this. The piano is done by the one and only Mr. Rick Wakeman. Just a fantastic track. That opening piano is wonderful. 8-line poem. Another fantastic track. Rick on the piano. You can't get anything better than great piano from Rick and David's vocal. Then we get my favourite song ever by David Bowie. Life on Mars. One of David's best vocals, and the piano work on this by Rick is fantastic. It's just an amazing track. Then we get Cooks, spelt with a K. It's gentle. It's just quirky but lovely. Quicksand. Now this is in the same sort of vein of Life on Mars. It's a mixture of Life on Mars and Starman. I love the track. Fill Your Heart. This is what I call an unplugged glam rock track. Andy Warhol. A really good acoustic track. I like this a lot. A song for Bob Dylan. One of my favourite tracks on the album. Some really great guitar work. Then we get a great track, and it was featured last week on our Coronation special, Queen Bitch. I think this is probably my second or third favourite track on here. Very similar to Suffragette City, but it's a great one. The Bellway Brothers. A really good track. One of the sort of uncut tracks, the deep cut tracks. Brilliant track. Brilliant album. There's not much between these top four albums, to be quite honest. I think this was David's best period. I love this album to death, and I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 9.9. So we've finally reached my number one album, and it was the first album, although I didn't get this album until I was 13, but it was the first album that I ever bought by David Bowie, and it's still my favourite album. From 1972, it's the fifth album, and it's the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Great album cover, of course. The backing band, the Spiders of Mars, Mick Ronson, Trevor Bolden, and Mick Woodmansey. It's described as a rock opera and a loose concept album, but it's just full of great songs. Opens up with the classic 5 Years. Wonderful track. Trevor's bass line on it is just terrific. Solve Love. Again, it's Trevor's bass line. It's just brilliant. Really drives the song along. Moon Age Daydream. Love this track with them heavy guitars mixed with acoustic guitars. It's a classic Bowie song. Starman. What do you say about that? Except just brilliant. Then we have a track written by Ron Davies. It Ain't Easy. Nice track. Trevor's bass line is killer. Heavy in parts as well. Just wonderful. Side 2 opens up with Lady Stardust. Another great song. Great arrangement. Great vocal from David. Star. Good rocker. Hang On To Yourself. Great rock and roll track. Awesome. Then we get Ziggy Stardust, the classic opening riff of an iconic song. But my favourite track on this album and it's my second favourite track by David Bowie, Suffragette City. I love this, and I just love that wham bam. Thank you, ma'am. Great track. And the last track on here is Rock and Roll Suicide. It's a great track to end this great album. I love the acoustic guitar on here. It's a bit almost a busking song. Great track. A brilliant album. So many classic songs on this. It's near enough a greatest hits album. It's one of the best albums from the 1970s. And I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of, guess what, 10 out of 10. Because I've never, I mean, when you think of it, how many big hits on here have we got? 5 Years, Starman, Ziggy Stardust, Suffragette City. And they're just the singles. And everyone else, every other track is absolutely rocking. So there we go. That's David Bowie. We have got another little bit of David Bowie to do, but that's for another day. That's all for today, because this takes such a long time to load up and render and everything. So I'll be back tomorrow. Well, we got the first of the live battle of the debuts. There's still debut albums, but it's bands' first live albums, and we're going to kick off the month of May with two great bands from the 60s, the Kinks and the Who. Tomorrow also is a wander down the sidewalk, so that means we're going to look at the top 10 singles in the United States on the 4th of May 1970. So have a good day everybody, and I will see you all tomorrow. And don't forget, tomorrow night 8 PM British summertime, if I can remember this, 12 noon on the Pacific coast of America and 3 PM on the eastern seaboard. It's live stream where we do all the good stuff. All the guests will be in. I think the usual suspects will be in there, so come and join us for that if you're not doing anything, or watch it afterwards like a lot of you have been doing. So have a great day everyone, and bye for now.